guys, it's Angelo, and after the recent confirmation and release of the patch notes for the Shadow Priest rework in Shadowlands, today it's finally here. The Shadow Priest rework is way deeper than I could have imagined, and well, one thing is for sure, I wasn't lying when I said that this was a literal rework of the spec. I mean, seriously, holy sh**. I don't even know where to actually start with this video because I'm actually so amazed. Okay, so let's try and take things slowly here. The spec has gone completely away from its old iteration, right? So if you want to play the old Shadow Priest then you have no choice but to play with Legacy of the Void, but more on that in just a bit. This new Shadow Priest focuses its damage output completely on damage over time and the according dot management. So, over the course of the upcoming weeks, it's going to take some time and some practice to learn the ins and the outs of this new spec, and to understand its philosophies completely. If you want to join the discussion with all things priest related, then be sure to join our Discord with the link in the description box below. And if you're new to the channel, then welcome of course, and subscribe if you wish to stay updated on the upcoming content, because there will be lots of it. Okay, so without any further ado, let's go right ahead and have a look. Okay. Let's start ourselves off with addressing the changes once more in detail. Now I will jump right into the gameplay and actually show you these things in practice once we discuss just a few basic things here. When it comes to base skill changes, the cast time of Void Eruption has been reduced by 40%, Mind Blast cooldown at rank 2 is now reduced by 7.5 seconds rather than the previous 7, which allows us to not experience this weird downtime every 7th or 8th Mind Blast cast, and Shadow Word Death no longer generates any insanity. One of the biggest changes comes in the form of shadowy apparitions, as this effect has been completely reworked. When you now use any single target ability that hits hard, so Mind Blast, Devouring Plague or Void Bolt, you will create an apparition that will travel towards any enemy, or rather all enemies affected by your vampiric touch, and then deal damage to them. If your single target abilities critically strike, you will instead generate 2 apparitions. This is a very important change and lets your apparitions have a bigger impact earlier on in the expansion, and actually weaves their dependency into our entire rotation pretty much, rather than just on the dots themselves as previously. The biggest change comes in the form of Void Form. It now has a 90-second cooldown, increases our damage done by 20% and lasts for 15 seconds. It no longer reduces the cooldown of Mind Blasts, but instead resets its cooldown upon activation and grants us 2 charges while within Void Form. We will not gain any haste while within Void Form anymore, so no more big haste numbers or anything like that. To hit home with this, it's important that I stress once more that Void Form is now simply our cooldown, okay? So it's not a playstyle defining spell anymore or anything the like at all. It does still come with a Void Eruption and with the ability to cast Void Bolts while within, but the Insanity Drain, the Haste Generation, and all of that is now completely gone. Insanity is therefore now a resource that enables a building and spending mechanism within our gameplay, centered around building Insanity up with essentially everything in our kit and then spending our Insanity on one spell, Devouring Plague, which our playstyle will revolve around. Devouring Plague now has a 6-second duration in total and deals 50% more damage than previously on the beta. I've explained this in my previous video, so I don't really want to go into detail here with that, but that's a very good thing. Now finally, we have a new passive called Dark Thoughts, which plays quite an important role in our rotation as well, as it does grant Mind Flay and Mind Sear a 2% chance to proc a free Mind Blast charge, which is instant cast, and this can actually stack up to 5 times. Okay, let's take a quick break for the explanations here, or rather of the explanations here, and actually dive into the gameplay and see how this looks in practice. As you can see, the most noticeable immediate factor is our Insanity is not draining, and us actually not spending it on activating Void Form, but much rather on spending it on Devouring Plague. For everyone who enjoyed floating around and having tentacles spawn around you once activating Void Form, I do have to disappoint you, because that will now only be available once every 90 seconds. We'll be grounded now mostly, and will focus on dot application and upkeeping in both single target and in multi-target situations, and even in AoE, which we'll get to in a moment. In a week from now, I'll be sure to update you guys on our rotation, but for now, it will essentially stay the same in form of building Insanity with Mind Blast and Mind Flay baseline, as well as applying both Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch, before then spending your Insanity on the application of Devouring Plague. Ideally, you will want to have Devouring Plague up on your targets at all times, depending on what talents you use, but this will mostly remain true. Whenever you do activate Void Form, you will somewhat fall back into the Legion and BFA playstyle, since Void Bolt will be activated and you will now also use Void Bolt to fill up your Insanity before spending it, once more only pretty much on Devouring Plague. The rotation will still directly scale with haste, similarly as it did before, because the more haste and critical strike we have available, the more Insanity we will have at our disposal, which in turn will be invested mostly into Devouring Plague. There's less ramping up involved in the classical sense than before, and with the right talents, there's well pretty much no ramp up involved at all, and you can spread most of your damage over to a potentially infinite amount of targets when played properly. This brings us to our talents, so let's go ahead and take a look into those more thoroughly. Okay, so once more we have quite a few changes here. I'll display our new talent tree in just a few moments for you guys to actually see it, so let's discuss the changes. Shadowy Insight is removed. Shadow Word Void is removed, and Death and Madness is now in their tier, along with Fortress of the Mind and a new talent, Unfurling Darkness. It allows your next Vampiric Touch, after casting a Vampiric Touch, to be instant cast and deal 155% worth of spell power as damage immediately, but this effect is locked behind a 15-second internal cooldown. That's totally fine though, more on that in a second. Psychic Link is a new level 40 talent and lets Mind Blast deal 60% of its damage to all targets within 40 yards affected by your Vampiric Touch. Lingering Insanity in our level 45 talent is of course removed, and so is Dark Void. We instead now get Searing Nightmare, which inflicts all enemies in close range of your Mind Seer target with Shadow Word Pain and deals a lot of damage, and also Damnation, which instantly and at no cost hits the target with all three of your dots, so Shadow Word Pain, Vampiric Touch and Devouring Plague, and is on a 45-second cooldown. Searing Nightmare is incredibly strong at the moment and allows for some instant AoE bombing without any ramp up. It's limited by its actual cost of 30 Insanity, but whenever you have the required Insanity or even more, you can potentially just spam it and deal a lot of damage. Keep in mind that you can only use it when channeling Mind Seer though. Void Torrent saw a little change as well, as it no longer pauses Insanity Drain, since there isn't any Insanity Drain anymore, but now refreshes the duration of your shadow damage over time effects when channeling. This is actually incredible because this does create a form of min-maxing around the use of Void Torrent itself. You can potentially cast a Devouring Plague on an enemy, then just keep up your regular rotation, and then refresh that same Devouring Plague and all other dots with Void Torrent before having enough Insanity generated again, since Void Torrent generates 60 Insanity, to spend on a Devouring Plague on another target. It'll be interesting to see, and rather how and if this will somehow play a role in an encounter, or not really. In our level 50 talent row, Dark Ascension has been removed, and Legacy of the Void has been reworked. I won't get too much into detail here, but what's important for you guys to know is that Legacy of the Void allows Void Form to be the same Void Form which it was previously, with an Insanity Drain, and with your goal being to stay in Void Form for as long as possible. And I'll show you that, of course, and how it looks in just a second. Surrender to Madness has its cooldown now at 90 seconds and could potentially become a very strong talent, and we also have a new talent in that row called Ancient Madness. This will most likely be our first go-to talent, as it increases our critical strike chance by 30% for 15 seconds, decreasing gradually by 2% per second whenever casting in Void Form. Or rather, whenever casting Void Form. I think you know what I mean. Okay. Let's jump back into gameplay and actually see how our talents affect the playstyle. The biggest change to playstyle when it comes to talents will be seen in the form of our second spell to cost Insanity, and the only talent that costs Insanity, which is Searing Nightmare. Searing Nightmare enables us to effectively bomb down big packs of mobs. And a quick reminder, Searing Nightmare instantly deals a formidable amount of shadow damage to enemies around the target, and afflicts them with Shadow Word Pain. If the enemy is already afflicted by your Shadow Word Pain, Searing Nightmare instead deals double the amount of its regular damage. This is only usable while channeling Mindseer, which ties it to only being used in AoE situations. The spell is a mix between Dark Void, which has been removed of course, and a former Legion ability called Searing Insanity, which some of you may still remember. Another major talent decision we will have to be making is between Psychic Link and Auspicious Spirits. Auspicious Spirits does pretty much the same thing it does now, while Psychic Link deals 60% of your Mind Blast damage to all enemies afflicted by your Vampiric Touch. Whereas Psychic Link certainly deals more damage currently, Auspicious Spirits provides a larger impact on your actual rotation because the apparitions generate insanity for you. With a lot of critical strike and haste, this may become problematic though because you will cap insanity, especially when pairing it with the likes of Mindbender and Misery. Currently, the go-to seems to be Psychic Link, but of course nothing is set in stone yet. Overall, all of our talents have a very direct impact onto our gameplay, which is a wonderful change in my opinion, and we're pretty much equipped for any situation at this point, albeit less so for single target and more so for multi-target, but nonetheless. It's great to see our talents actually impact our gameplay, rather than just being homogenized and a no-brainer most of the time. Okay. So overall, I'm absolutely not disappointed by these changes so far. I know that many priests out there hate to see Void Form go and its according playstyle from Battle for Azeroth and Legion, but I'm sure that the large majority of you guys will enjoy this new spec. It's definitely a return to the era of the Shadow Priest before Legion, but with remnants of the Legion and BFA Priest remaining within the spec in form of Insanity, which would be the equivalent to Shadow Orbs, and things like Void Form and Void Bolt still in place, just locked behind a cooldown rather than being the core of the spec. This new Shadow Priest will be a lot easier to balance and to work with, I believe, when going forward at least, but I do want to be fair here and, well, say that the Shadow Priest isn't quite as unique anymore as it was before. I think that everything here comes with a cost really, so having a unique playstyle while also having a spec that is very easy to balance for developers, well, that might be a bit much to ask for, and personally, I am very willing to take that sacrifice of the Legion Shadow Priest while getting something perhaps more enjoyable. It'll be interesting to see how talents like Surrender to Madness or even Legacy of the Void do perform when we can test them more thoroughly throughout time, and it will be incredibly interesting to see how this rework will resonate with the majority of the player base, so you guys, once it's been out and about for a couple of months or so, and once we see it in effect in Mythic Plus, raids, and any endgame content. Personally, I think that the Shadow Priest will once more see a tremendous influx of players coming to the spec, very similar to the start of Legion, and it's not far-fetched to think that the Shadow Priest can be the flavor of the month at the start of Shadowlands, solely because of this rework. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below though. Do you think this rework is a step into the right direction? Do you dislike the old Shadow Priest being, well, no more? I personally like the path the spec is taking, but be sure to let me know your thoughts as well. As always, thank you everyone for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like as it goes a very long way, and again, feel free to subscribe in order to stay updated on the content of this channel. A very special thanks to all supporters over at Patreon, you guys are awesome, and thank you everyone for your input, your opinions, and your support. Now, as always, have a good one my friends, get excited for Shadowlands, and I will see you all in the next one.